Well, hey everyone, welcome back to our evening devotion. It's just shy of 8 o'clock, and we're going to continue on with Max Lucado's book, Anxious for Nothing, and a Calm in a Chaotic World. And that's actually the subject of what we're talking about in this chapter, is this calm that we can have a kind of a it's this contagious calm. And so we continue on, as we had heard about this morning, about the Russian submarine sub-captain that kind of was cautiously calm so that there wasn't this big nuclear missile event in the coast of Florida. And so here Max continues on to talk about the contagious calm. Let's continue to read. The contagious calm person is the one who reminds others God is in control. This is the executive who tells the company, let's do our part and we'll be okay. This is the leader who sees the challenge and acknowledges it and observes it, and he says, these are tough times, but we'll get through them. Gentleness. Where do we quarry for this gem? How can you and I keep our hands away from that trigger, the ripcord? How can we keep our heads when everyone else is losing theirs? We plumb the depths of that second phrase. Let your gentleness be evident to all, and the Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. Philippians 4, 5, and 6. So that you are not alone, but there is never a moment in which you face life without God. God is near. God repeatedly pledges his proverbial presence to his people. To Abram, God said, do not be afraid. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. That's Genesis 15:1. To Hagar, the angel announced, do not be afraid. God has heard. That's Genesis 21:17. When Isaac was expelled from his land by the Philistines and forced to move from place to place, God appeared to him and reminded him, do not be afraid, for I am with you. Again, Genesis 26:24. And after Moses' death, God told Joshua, one of my favorite scriptures, do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. God was with David in spite of his adultery, with Jacob in spite of his conniving, with Elijah in spite of his lack of faith. Then, in the ultimate declaration of communion, God called himself Emmanuel, which means God with us. He became flesh, and he became sin. He defeated the grave. He is still with us in the form of his Spirit. He comforts, teaches, and convicts. Do not assume God is watching from a distance. Avoid the quicksand that bears the marker God has left you. Do not indulge in this lie. And if you do, your problem will be amplified by a sense of loneliness. It's one thing to face a challenge, but to face it all alone? Isolation creates a downward cycle of fret. Choose instead to be the person who clutches the presence of God with both hands. The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? That's Psalm 118, verse 6. I want to read that statement one more time, those that are just getting on right now. Isolation creates a downward cycle to fret. Choose instead to be the person who clutches the presence of God with both hands. Because the Lord is near, we can be anxious for nothing. This is Paul's point. Remember, he was writing a letter. He did not use chapter and verse numbers. This system was created by scholars in the 13th and the 16th century. The structure helps us, but it's also a hindrance. The apostle intended the words in verses 5 and 6 to be read in one fell swoop. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. Early commentators saw this. John Chrysostom liked the phrase, the verse, he wrote it this way. He said, the Lord is at hand. Have no anxiety. Theodoret of Cyrus translated the same words, and he said, the Lord is near. Have no worries. We can calmly take our concerns to God because he is as near as our next breath. This was the reassuring lesson from the miracle of the bread and the fish, in an event crafted to speak to an anxious heart. Jesus told his disciples to do the impossible, feed 5,000 people. And then this is what he says. Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread? And that all these may eat. But this is he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. John 6:5-6. See, when John described this gathering as a great multitude, he was serious. There were 5,000 men, plus women and children. Imagine a capacity crowd at a sports arena, and you've got this picture. Jesus is willing to feed the entire crowd. The disciples, on the other hand, wanted to get rid of everyone. Send the multitudes away, that they may go into villages and buy themselves food. I detect some anxiety in their words. I sense a tone of almost aggravation, frustration. They don't call Jesus master. They don't come to him with a suggestion. They march as a group to Christ and tell him what to do. The disciples see a valley full of hungry people. Growling stomachs will soon become scowling faces, and the disciples might have a riot on their hands. They had every reason to feel unsettled. Then again, did they not have an equal reason to feel at peace? By this point, in their experience with Jesus, they had seen him, let's count it, they had seen him heal leprosy, heal the centurion's servant without going to the servant's bedside, heal Peter's mother-in-law, calm a violent sea, heal a paralytic, heal a woman who had been sick for 12 years, raise a girl from the dead, drive out an evil spirit, heal a demon-possessed man in a cemetery, change water into wine, heal a man who had been invalid for 38 years. Did any of these disciples pause long enough to think, well, Jesus healed the sick people, raised the dead girl, calmed the angry waves. I wonder, might we have a solution we have not seen? After all, he's standing right here. Let's ask him. The stunning answer is, did it occur to anyone to ask Jesus for help? Well, the answer is no. They acted as if Jesus weren't even present. Rather than count on Christ, they had the audacity to tell the creator of the world that nothing could be done because there wasn't enough money. How did Jesus maintain his composure? How did he keep from looking at the disciples and saying, have you forgotten who I am? Finally, a boy offered his lunch basket to Andrew, who tentatively mentioned the offer to Jesus. Jesus says this. He says, have the people sit down. There are plenty of grass in the place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Then Jesus took the loaves and gave thanks and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. When they had all enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them, and they filled the 12 baskets with pieces of 5 barley loaves left over from those that had eaten. Not one coin was spent. They started the day with 200 coins, and they ended the day with 200 coins. In addition, they filled 12 baskets with leftover food. A souvenir for each apostle, perhaps. The people were fed, the bank account was untouched, and we have a lesson to learn. Anxiety is needless because Jesus is near. You aren't facing 5,000 hungry bellies, but you are facing a deadline in a few days. A loved one in need of a cure, a child who is being bullied at school, a spouse intertwined in temptation, or in our case, dealing with the 5th week of COVID-19 lockdown. On one hand, you have a problem. And on the other hand, you have a limited quantity of vision and wisdom and energy and patience and time. What you have is nowhere near what you need. You have a thimbleful and you need bucket loads. Typically, you'd get anxious. You'd tell God to send the problem packing. You've given me too much to handle, Jesus. This time, instead of starting with what you have, you start with Jesus. Start with his wealth, his resources, his strength. And before you open the ledger, open your heart. Before you count the coins, count the heads. Count the number of times Jesus has helped you face the impossible. Before you lash out in fear, look up in faith. Take a moment and turn to your Father for help. It's interesting, a couple times where that's happened in our lives. I remember one Christmas time, we just got to the point where I think it was like a few weeks before Christmas, we had like no money for buying the kids gifts. And we're not buying extravagant gifts. Like we were going to buy like one gift of Lego for Cyprus, and I think even the same thing. There was like a girl Lego or something special for Michaela, and we were at our wits' end. We just didn't know. Our bank account was in the negative, and I remember going to God. It was getting cold. It was December. I think it maybe frosted over, and I'd gone outside to pray, and I just looked up. I said, God, you gotta, and I've said this so many times, God, you gotta help me here. I don't know. Everything that is known, all the pathways that I know are shut down. It doesn't make any sense. So I've done everything in the natural realm, Lord. I need you to move in the supernatural. Help us out. So I made my requests known to God. I wasn't fishing for a blessing. I wasn't going on Facebook and saying, hey, I need gifts for my kids. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to put your needs out there to pastors and churches saying, hey, this is going to be a really tough time and I need some help. And I want you to do that. But we hadn't got to that point yet. I remember asking God, like, I need help. I don't know what to do. Same time, my wife was online selling stuff that we had in the house. Like Trade Me, back in Victoria, it was called usevictoria.com. And usevictoria.com was, like, we lived on Vancouver Island, so a lot of people didn't want their stuff thrown into the landfill So a lot of people bought and sold stuff, very much like here with Trade Me. So my wife started just posting and posting and posting more and more stuff, like, I don't know, clothes and things that she was making, and just, I don't know, all kinds of stuff that we started selling, old toys, old this, old that, and I don't know, bikes, and, exercise equipment, whatever it was. We just started, not that we were purging, but it was just stuff that we were starting to sell. And then about 3 or 4 days before Christmas, we had made enough money to pay for gifts for our kids. And it just ceases to amaze me. My bank account wasn't touched, in the sense I didn't go into greater amounts of debt. But here was the solution. And God was showing us, saying, look, I got you guys. It may have not been the way that you thought it'd come, but I've got you. I remember on my first missions trip, and some of you that are watching from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, you'll remember part of my HMS program where I had no money for our trip. And someone miraculously paid for my entire trip. To this day, I have no idea who came upstairs, walked up from the snow that one morning, up those stairs at Northwest Bible College, tapped on the glass, told the lady that they're going to pay for John Thwaites' missions trip, and paid for the entire balance of it. And then I came up hours later, not defeated, but, I had given up asking if anyone had any money for me. And I remember the administrator came around the side door and said, John, don't you want to know? You didn't ask. I said, well, what's going on? He goes, someone came this morning and paid your balance off. I was like, God is near. God has a solution. And sometimes, God says yes, God says no. And the hard part, I think, for a lot of us is God says, wait. And that's the hard one. But I think it's not wait because I like to leave you hanging. This is not some weird reality show where there's that pregnant pause and everyone's like, oh. That's not how God works it. But I think he does say wait because he wants to reveal the glory. He wants to reveal his presence in your life. He wants you to know that he is near. Had someone had told me, like prophetically, like, oh yeah, your outreach is totally paid for, not to worry, just keep going, I don't think I would have prayed as hard. I don't think I would have spent time in fasting and prayer and giving this to the Lord. I don't know if I would have done that if it was already kind of done deal. God's always out for growing discipleship, and that's what he does in the story of the 5,000. He's showing his disciples, look, you need to trust in God. Trust that he's got a plan that's outside your realm of reason and logic. I don't know what's happening with this lockdown in week 3, 4, or 5. If we go into level 3, and then what happens if we go back to level 4 and we have a second uprising of the virus? I don't know. I can't do the crystal ball. And nor am I going to catastrophize our situation and look at everything dimly. I want to believe God, and I love that part is before I lash out in fear, I want to look up in faith. I want to take moments to seek my Father and have Jesus near me all the time. So I don't know where your situation is. I know some of you are sick. Some of you guys are lonely. Some of you are sitting in silence going, look, I am depressed. I've got some mental health issues. I'm even feeling suicidal. And I want to say to you right now, if just me and you right now, don't do it. Because God loves you. And God has a plan for your life. And he will never, ever leave you. And he is near. So that's the lifeline. And if I could throw that out to you, Don't be in fear, but be in faith. God love you. I'm praying for you tonight. Join us on Sunday. We have a special video where we've decided to do all of our Sunday pre-recorded this week. So we have amazing worship. Then we have someone doing the national anthem, because I don't know it. I know my Canadian one, but I don't know the New Zealand one. So we have someone doing that. I'm doing a special Anzac presentation, and then I'm preaching. And then there's communion. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of cool things happening, lots of elements. Make sure you do get your communion set ready for Sunday. And then afterwards, we're going to do a Zoom follow-up call with me and with some of our other staff. So we are excited to reconnect with you on Sunday. Pray for me, pray for our families, pray for one another, and continue to connect with each other during our lockdown. God bless you. We love you. And we'll see you Sunday. God bless.